LTO. Welcome to LTO. We have an amazing guest today, and we talking about LTO being a license to operate. We got an amazing guest today. Our brother Billy Moore, William Moore, author, father, grandfather, renowned, prestigious individual who's definitely been helping our community in so many different ways, man. How you doing, Billy?
I'm doing great, man. I'm doing great. Saturday morning, y'all got me out early, but it's all good.
That's what's up, man.
Yes, sir.
So, Peter, man, what are we talking to Billy about today at LTO?
Well, you know, the whole idea here is that we really want to hold up and lift up folks like you who are, who are saving lives, how you're saving those lives, why you do this work, whatever it is in your background that brought you to this stage of life, and just what we can expect in this city, because there's a lot going on right now. You know, you're probably aware that the violence trends are looking better every year. We've had three years in a row of declining gun violence. Mm-hmm. This year we're down 25-30%. Things are looking good, and we don't always stand up and say it's because of us. You know, we're all with Chicago CRED, of course, but we do think that we're making a difference. So I'd love to just begin by asking you to talk about the work you do. Now, you are the site manager for one of CRED's 7 or 8 sites, one on the west side, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yep.
And talk a little bit about tell me, what does that mean? What does that do?
As you guys know, Chicago CRED is made up from the 5 pillars approach through street outreach, life coaching, the therapeutic component, education, and then, when guys phase through those particular cycles, they go on to employment and training. My job is to make sure that all those things align together for the mission of CRED, with the main focus of helping to reduce the risk to the individuals that come into our program. And those are our clients, right? Our clients are from the west side, North Lawndale area that comes into my site. You talked about saving lives, right? And it was interesting because one of our check-in questions earlier this week, if you had a superpower, what would it be, right? And we went around the whole room asking these young men that, right? And staff participated in check-ins too. So when it got around to me, I said, I already have a superpower, and it was saving lives, right? And I started by saving my own life. But I can't save nobody's life. They have to save their own life. The only thing we at Chicago CRED can do is offer the space and the opportunity and the tools to give them to save their own life, right? And what we as a staff have to offer is examples too on how to do that. So, but with that being said, we also gotta embrace the reality, that we can't save everybody's life, right? So, with saving lives, you mentioned how we down, the numbers is down, the percentage around
the violence is down.
The violence is down.
Yeah.
And I believe, we have to take a lot of credit in that. Not just Chicago CRED, but the overall CVI community violence intervention, because law enforcement can't do it alone.
Describe for me what these guys are like when they walk in our door first time. Like, what are they like?
They coming straight from their circumstances. And we already know what creates violence in Chicago, right? The circumstances that exist in certain communities where they don't have
plenty of guns.
Oh man, everybody got guns in Chicago. They
How old were you when you first got a gun, or first saw one, or first touched one, or
I was real young. Guns is like, American pie, apple pie in Chicago. It's a pastime, right?
How old were you?
My family had guns.
Yeah, everybody had them, right?
Yeah, I was a kid.
You're talking about New Year's Eve.
Yeah, everybody shot
outside
guns.
shooting in the air.
I was like,
that's the thing.
5, 6 years old when my grandfather let me shoot his gun, like you say, on New Year's Eve. But when I probably touched my first gun in terms of me having a gun, It was probably around 13, 14 years old. And I think that the day that I kind of like picked up a gun, I instantly fell in love with a gun because I didn't understand, but I had this perception of what type of power that you had with a gun, right? But I didn't realize at the time that me picking up that gun is what kind of paved my path to the penitentiary as well. And I realized that, looking back on that time, when you start carrying guns, you're going to get gun problems. And once you get gun problems, you tend to deal with situations different with a gun than you probably would deal with a situation if you didn't have a gun.
Billy, just to double back just a little bit, because I know we getting into certain things, but before we go too far, I want people to know who you are. You know what I'm saying? What brought you to this work?
What brought me to this work was that journey started probably when I was 16 years old. When I had pretty much for the most part made the worst mistake of my life. Being responsible for taking away the life of another young man. And I won't go so far into that because that story is well known, but it was a tragic mistake that cost me 20 years of my life in prison. I spent 20 years incarcerated. But during that time of being incarcerated, I had to really self-reflect on the type of way that my life needed to be. I couldn't do nothing but that time at the time, but while doing that time, I started preparing my mind how I need to start living my life, right? And I couldn't make these type of mistakes that would continue to cost me like this. I was fortunate enough to have a son, and I was really hoping that I could do everything I could for him when I came home so that he wouldn't end up making the mistakes that I made. Unfortunately, I ended up losing my son to gun violence. I literally lost my son to gun violence 2 weeks before I found myself doing community violence intervention work. I had worked for over 10 years with an organization that helped me get back on my feet when I transitioned back into society. It was a reentry organization. They employed me. That was my introduction into really the social service field, right? So I was helping men not recidivate going back to prison. That job was heavily dependent on public funds, and at some point, we end up losing our funding. So I lost my job, right? So I had to figure out my next career move, right? And at that time, Arnie Duncan had started Chicago CRED maybe about a year before this happened. 2016. Yeah. My son had got killed July 6, 2017. Mm-hmm. Wow. And I had found out about this organization called Iman, the Inner City Muslim Action Network, and how their Green Reentry department had just got expanded by Arnie Duncan's organization, Chicago CRED, which was in 2017. And a young lady who had worked with me at Safer told me this would be a good organization for you to come and work at. So I ended up going over there. I found out that the brothers, they used to go to this restaurant early in the morning after they prayed. So I started showing up at the restaurant. I got to know the executive director, some key individuals over there. And basically, they offered me the opportunity to interview for the position. That's when I met Ali. We all got hired at the same time. But literally, when I got the call that offered me the job, and they told me my first day, they wanted me to start, which was a Friday, July 14th. I told...
8 days after your son was killed.
8 days after my son was killed. Wow. They had no idea what happened. I told them I wasn't gonna be able to make that training. And they asked me why, and I told them because that's the day of my son's funeral. So Romney, the executive director, told me, he said, we can hold back off, starting with you on that day. I told him, I said, no, I'll be there Monday. And the reason why I knew I had to show up Monday is because that was the only way I was going to be able to kind of deal with my grief of losing my son, because I knew who I was going to be working with. I knew the young men who was going to be in that program. They was just like my son. They was just like I was at one point in life. And in order for me to really just stay focused on, you know, kind of honoring the promise I made to myself when I was 16 years old, and also to honor the promise I made to my son and any young man that was pretty much like my son, and quite honestly, my victim, was for me to be able to show up Monday morning and give my whole heart to these young guys so that they wouldn't end up like my son, like me, or even like my victim. And since that day, I met Ali. We have been doing this work. It was literally 4 months after I got hired, I lost my first participant. The first young man I recruited into the program.
You know,
which was
we lost
Stephen
about
Ward.
we lost something like about 40, 45 people between the participants and staff since CRED started. I did a count a year ago. It was about 40, and I know we've had a couple since then. So,
Well, I personally lost 14 that I've worked with personally.
You know, I was there. Me and Billy history is real rich and different, because I never knew how he got the position, because we were both up for this like supervised position, and he got it. But I just found out he was going to breakfast with the brothers early in the morning to get there. I didn't do that.
he's working.
He's working.
I was trying to figure out how they hire this guy he my supervisor, but I had been volunteering at E-Man for years, right? So I could not put this together.
He's a politician, man.
Right, I'm
the politics.
I'm the Muslim
strategy.
I'm the Muslim. This our brother, but he ain't Muslim. I'm like, man, how they hire him over me? So, you know, basically, you talking about a participant named Stephen Ward that we lost, and he was such a. He was from Cabrini Greens.
Mm-hmm.
And at first, initially, he was supposed to be on my caseload. I looked at his address, and the address read that he was from my neighborhood.
Which is K-Town?
L-Town. Don't do that again.
Don't mix them up. K-Town, L-Town?
Remember, this about LTO.
Okay.
Don't do
You
that.
gotta have a license to operate.
Don't do
You gotta
that.
know your neighborhood.
Don't do that, man. That's Brooklyn. Do I call you, say the Bronx? Do I say, oh, man, you from
Bronx.
Long Island?
Bronx.
See,
Don't
that's what I'm
mention
saying.
Brooklyn. See?
Don't
That's what I'm
mention
saying.
Brooklyn,
That's
man,
what I'm
okay?
talking
I'm from the
about.
Bronx, okay?
That's what I'm talking about. So,
So I shouldn't be wearing this hat.
It's all right. It's all right.
so what I will say is that when I seen his address, I initially thought he was from my neighborhood. But what happened was his child's mother was from that area. His fiance was there. She rented an apartment there, but he wasn't from there. But I had never met him. I didn't know Billy had recruited him. We just got the case, so I'm like, nah, I'm gonna pass him on, because I only, initially, I want to kind of see where he at, make sure, we on the up and up, just in case he may have heard something about me, anything. So long story short, Billy, he got him, and he came in, his first day he came in, shot up.
Yeah, literally.
The first day he came in,
He been shot like 2 days earlier.
he had been shot up
Yeah.
the night before, the day before.
So
something
remember,
like that.
we sent the guys through an orientation, and he showed up every day for orientation, and we only had so many slots for guys to be in the program, unfortunately. But he made it. So the first day that they were supposed to start the program, the first day after orientation, that night he had got shot in the hip. So when the first day, he called me and he was like, man, I've been in the hospital all night. I'm like, why? He said, well, I'm going to be late. That's what he was called. I'm like, why? I was in the hospital all night. I'm like, okay, what happened? Somebody shot me. I'm like, somebody shot you. But as I'm listening to him on the phone, I'm hearing his voice too. I'm like, where you at? He like, I'm walking up the stairs.
Right. We looked in the hall. He got like a crutch going up the stairs.
This young man wanted to be a part of the
I was
program
gonna say he wanted so
much.
bad.
He left the hospital. He didn't want to miss out. He had a hole in his leg. I sent him home. I said, "No, man, you got to go home. You can't catch no infections and stuff like that." But the backstory on Stephen Ward is the fact that he was a young man who was the middle child, his oldest brother, and he had a younger sister. He never knew who his father was. He was incarcerated his whole life, and his mother was a drug addict. So they basically raised themselves. He was from Cabrini Green. You know, he was basically grew up in the street, you know, in and out of jail. He had his past, but then he was able to meet a young lady who was a few years older than him. And what he had to do was kind of level up to where she was at. She had some expectations. And him finding this program was his chance to kind of like really get focused and start doing what was right. They got engaged and they was expecting their first child. So this program became everything to him.
And he was dedicated.
Everything to him.
He was dedicated, meaning like,
Yes.
you know, we had a program from Monday through Thursday. He wanted to be there Friday, Saturday, Sunday type of thing.
Yeah, right.
That was his dedication. We started working on a piece of property to make it like for the youth building, and he was doing carpentry training, a trade. So he's like working on this trade, like he's learning how to put the drywall in. We had footage of this, so we see like he was doing this thing.
He was able
like,
to document all this.
like very like intense. And I'll never forget the day before he got killed, we was in the office, and he was like kind of begging to work that day.
He asked our program manager, could he work? See, well, Iman every year has this year-end event where they raise money, right? And it's a black tie event where all the staff, all hands on deck, we got to show up. And he wanted to work that day. And for whatever reason, I didn't know this, but he went to the program manager because he was kind of head over the project Ali talked about, the construction project. And he told him no. So when we had the event, that Saturday morning, I woke up to like 20 missed calls and my phone just loaded up with text messages. Now, you never want to wake up to your phone having all these missed calls and text messages.
In this work.
In this work.
Never a good thing.
And when I looked, before I opened up the message, I seen missed calls from his fiance and his mother. And I knew right then and there something went right? So by the time I called them back, you know, she's hysterical and said Stephen was just shot and killed. And, you know, just understanding that this is like 4 months after my own son had got killed. The first guy I recruited into the program lost his life, right? And that was real hard for all of us. The circumstances around Stephen getting killed was that he was out with his fiance at a party for a family, a child birthday party. They was at some of the jumping sky
Jump
zone
zone.
jump zone.
Jack thing,
Yeah, out in the western suburbs, enjoying family time. And as they left, it was just some people, man, from his old neighborhood saw him. And, you know, as much as we try to change,
You just got spotted.
you know, everybody don't care about your change. That's why it's important that the work we do, we scale so high that we able to touch as many people as possible. Because if I'm working on changing my life, but if I did something to Ali 3 years ago and ain't nobody reached him yet to help him change his life, he's still caught up in what it was that I've long moved beyond. But it may catch up with me if he see me.
I mean, I always wonder if one of the things we have to do is just help all of our guys just, you know, get out of their environment, you know, somehow get out of their neighborhood. Like,
Well,
can they stay in their neighborhood
But that's
and
really
heal?
not practical.
It's not practical, right?
And it's because, I mean, it's like, you can't really, like I heard somebody say, if the flower is broke, you can't fix the flower. You got to fix the environment in order for the flower to become unbroken. If you want to see that flower nourished, you can't unpluck it, unroot it, and take it somewhere. You need to fix the environment that flower grow in. So what we have to do, and you know, Peter and Ali, our work is very important that we scale it so we can touch as many young men as possible, because whoever shot and killed Stephen Ward would be somebody that we would be actively recruiting to get in the program before he did that, so he wouldn't do that. You know, and since Steve got in the program, he was somebody who we was working with who got shot who wouldn't go retaliate.
So he gets shot in the western suburbs with his fiance and his baby.
She got shot too.
She got hit too.
She was pregnant at the time with his firstborn,
So
with his first child. And he really died a hero, because when he saw the guys coming up, he laid his body on top of her.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and he took the brunt of it. She caught one in the arm, but he died saving them. You know.
So, what would have been in the minds of those shooters in this situation? Just speculate a little bit. Like, why would these guys be going after Stephen, who's been staying out of trouble for months, who's there with his kid and his wife or his fiance? Like, why would they do that?
I can't speak for they mindset because I don't know. But the only thing I can surmise is that, you know, when we find ourselves caught up in situations and I feel like I need to get my lick back, if I see the opportunity, I just take it.
So it could have been from something a year earlier,
So
2 years earlier?
The answer to what you're saying often is trauma.
It's trauma.
Like you talking about
Unresolved
trauma. Somebody, I'm hurting, and I want somebody else to hurt.
And I'm gonna say this too. You know, that's a real. You know, that's the basic, simpler way of explaining that. But you know, the street, you know, live by a certain set of rules and politics, right? And that's why CVI, we just don't, you know, work to reduce violence. We also kind of try to work to mediate conflicts, right, that exist in the community. Some of these conflicts, young men been grandfathered into them. They go back 20 and 30 years. And they don't even understand why. They just grew up in a certain area and inherited the bullshit that's been going on over there for so long, you know? So I can't explain from the mind of the young individuals why they did that. I can only say that, you know, it was probably some things that had took place, whether Steve was directly involved or not. They knew he was from a certain area. They was probably from a certain area, you know, and they just felt like this was an opportunity to get at somebody who they felt like they was into it with, you know. Now, is that the case? I don't know, but because they never arrested anybody.
You know, when they reported it in the news report, they said something like gang related.
Gang member shot and killed.
They didn't. They, you know, once again, even with Billy saying, man, it's somebody who saved the life of a woman that he was in love with, that was pregnant with his child, that took the. I mean, we talking about character, morals. We talking about somebody who tried to go to work, and wasn't allowed to work that day. And I'm not blaming anybody, but this was and instead of going to work, I can't go to work. Well, let me spend some time with my family, like the average man would do.
So the narrative that usually is painted in circumstances like this, young, black, gang affiliated, kill, right?
Yeah.
Now,
You know what the message there is, right?
absolutely.
Yeah. Don't worry about this guy.
But
Don't worry about. That's what I'm talking about. That's when I said it wasn't nobody that was.
But we had to push back on that. You know why? Because we knew Stephen Ward was much more than what they described. These are people who don't know the circumstances, who didn't know him, didn't see him showing up every day, showing up the first day with a bullet in him, and willing to do whatever he needed to do to change his life. They didn't understand that this was a young man who we loved, and he loved what he was able to do and learn about himself, what he was accomplishing. So we didn't see Stephen as a gang member. We didn't see Stephen Ward as somebody that you just write off in a 3-word narrative to dismiss him and his whole life is gone. No. And we wasn't gonna allow that to be what was gonna be his legacy either.
Just to add and before he died, he had this passion of really like called himself like almost like narrating or telling a story about Kanika Jenkins and her situation, being found in a hotel. Like he was adamant about trying to figure out if it was any foul play. And he was going on Facebook Live with this type of stuff. So his life had made a real change, a 180. You know, he really made a real change. So that's one of the stories that I definitely wanted to come out.
You know, me and Ali, and you talked about the number of people who we've lost at CRED, right? Me and Ali sharing a lot of these losses that I talk about, the 14, you know, of working with these young men. And all of them got stories that is more than just how society will kind of write them off as being not worthy of, you know, living.
That's my whole purpose here.
Yeah.
That's my job here, is to help lift up these stories and show people that that these are, you know, good human beings who are trying to survive in a tough world, and I think a lot of people just don't understand what it's like. They just don't understand. Certainly, a lot of people from my community just do not understand what it's like to grow up around gun violence, to grow up around hunger, around poverty, around you know, homes, unstable homes, and you know, so they need to hear it.
You know, I just want to make sure we get some things out that a lot of people just wouldn't know, right? Because we from different cultures, different world. We're in the same world, but our cultures are different, you know. And when we talking about the media and what's portrayed to the media, I often think about, in this moment, I'm thinking about, you know, you seeing Billy today, and so much in his past, it was negative as far as what was written about him. You know, today he's an author, but, you know, just by me knowing him and speaking to him in our years, you know, he had a what someone would say is probably an unlikely mentor, someone that people hear almost as the boogeyman. But when you hear Billy's side of what the mentorship he got from this man, you may see a different picture. Who is this person, Billy?
You're talking about Larry Hoover.
And now, when you went to prison, I mean, tell us about how you met Larry Hoover.
Larry's in prison today. He was the head of the Gangster Disciples.
Yes.
Growth and Development Organization.
Absolutely. You know, everybody from Chicago, I'm sure, probably, you know, then heard of, you know, Larry Hoover and, you know, what he was partly responsible for establishing the street organization, Gangster Disciples, you know, Growth and Development. But as a kid, when I got sent to prison, I went to Stateville when I was 18 years old. My lawyer, who actually worked on my case by the name of Isaiah Skip Gant, was also Larry's lawyer and part of the legal team that represented the brothers that was called the Pontiac 17. For those people who don't know what the Pontiac 17 is, it was 17 young men at the time who was indicted for 3 murders that took place in Pontiac, 3 correctional officers during the 1978 Pontiac riots, right? And what happened was my lawyer and that team represented those 17 guys, and Larry happened to be one of the 17, Pontiac 17. They ended up getting acquitted of that case, right? So when I got arrested, caught my case, I ended up having that lawyer, and he told me, you know, if you go to Stateville, make sure you reach out to Larry, you know, and let him know, you know, Skip told me, you know, you should holler at him. I'm like, I knew if I was going to Stateville, I was going to holler at Larry anyway, right? But, you know, when I got...
He was a leader, even in prison?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So when I got to Stateville, Larry sent for me, you know, and basically told me, you know, man, keep my head down, do right, and go to school. Stay out of trouble, you know. And for 3.5 years while I was in Stateville, Larry was there before he was transferred. And pretty much the things that I got a chance to learn from not just Larry, but the other brothers that was there under that form of leadership, under that concept, under the culture that was established or that was existing at that time in prison, it benefited me a lot to be able to kind of like start helping myself think right. The same thing that we kind of helping these young men work through around self-regulating their thoughts and not being so reactionary in their emotions and stuff like that. Those were kind of the lessons that I had started learning at that time that benefited me to be able to do my time in prison. And because of Larry's leadership, Larry had a real interest in seeing young guys be able to stand strong in their manhood and be able to go and endure prison, so he made sure that all the crazy stuff wasn't happening. You know what I'm saying? People was gonna get a fair shake, and if you was able to stand on your own, you ain't have to worry about nothing. And that gave me the opportunity to really do my bit and learn a lot, you know what I'm saying, from people like Larry. So, I can accredit it a lot of the way I think, you know what I'm saying, and how I saw myself and the way I was able to, maintain and survive that time was partly due to him and some of the things that I was able to learn from him, and being up under him, for like damn near 3.5 years. So
You said one time, he said, he told you, you said, man, what should I do? He said, man, go to school.
yep.
And then he said, when you finished and got your high school diploma, you went back to him and said, okay, now what should I do? He said, what?
Don't stop.
Go back to school. Finish,
Yeah, keep
finish
going.
school. Now you talking about a guy that got
know.
heat at the time. Billy got 20 years to do.
Yeah.
So the reason I think this is important is because we hear from one side what a person is about based on the circumstance, whatever took place. Now we all go in court and we say, nah, guilty. But sometimes you don't hear the other side just based on, I'm being told not to even speak on what
Right.
really occurred. But the character of a person speaks on the actions that they do without people knowing what they're doing.
When no one's looking.
When nobody looking. So he don't know Billy's gonna become an author or come out and, be a life coach and a site manager. But Billy will tell you that his influence probably caused a lot of that at an early age.
It did. It did, man.
Why'd you write your book? What inspired you to write a book and tell your story?
Because if anybody knew the circumstances around what sent me to prison, same way what we just talked about with Stephen Ward and how the media described him as just being this gang member who was shot and killed.
Yep.
And they just kind of dismissed him and wrote him off with that little statement, right? Was kind of the same reason why I decided to write my book, because what was said about me was that, I wasn't deserving of a life, beyond the mistake that I made. 16 years old, I was kind of made to be the worst of the worst. They talked about the circumstances. So many people had so many interpretations around the circumstances of what led me to prison, which wasn't true. And what I seen when I started working at Eman, we invited this organization called Contextos to work with our young men, right?
They help people tell their stories and
Right.
write their stories and things.
But what stood out was a proverb that I heard, right? And it says, the tale of the hunt will always glorify the hunter until the lion speaks. And that kind of made me feel like, man, that's speaking to me. That speak directly to my story.
African proverb, right?
It's an African proverb. And I felt like when I started working at Eman, I came through prison, I've been doing this, that, and the other. I'm doing this now. Probably is the best time for me to tell my story now, because prison, I wasn't going to write a book in prison, right? I didn't know how, You know, first of all, I need to just keep waking up every day, then hopefully one day I'll be free, right? And then that happened. Then I came home. Then I lost my son, right? I got able to get into a position where I could take care of myself. A good job, not just a job. I found myself with a career, right? But I ain't think that, I ain't really got nothing to talk about right now, right? I still got some work to do, right? So finding myself in the CVI field and on the heels of losing my son and then working to, you know, save lives of young men that was just like me, just like my son, just like my victim, right? And see these guys for who they are, see the good in them, see how, man, I could tell you, me and Ali could tell you about so many days we sat in Iman and laughed and just had so much fun with these young guys, getting to know them and seeing their character. My nephew also was killed.
Taking them on trips.
You know, my nephew became a part of Iman. He ended up losing his life. You know, he was probably one of the funniest little dudes ever came through that program, right?
Yeah, D-man.
You know, but now I'm compelled because they still telling the narrative around how our people are, and it's not true. You know, it wasn't true for them as well as it wasn't true for me. They define us so much based off the mistakes that we make. They define us so much based off the circumstances which we got to navigate to live through. They defined us based off so much of the wrong decisions we made, left with the smallest amount of choices that we got to make. They define us based off these narrow margins we live in. And once we step outside of them, we pay the heaviest consequences. So I decided that I had to tell my story now and step outside of those margins. People have to see us beyond these mistakes that we make. People have to see us beyond the circumstances that we come from, with which we forced to make decisions based off how we live. So
and
that's why.
And the book is called
Until the Lion Speaks.
Till the Lion Speaks.
One of the best books ever written, man.
Yes, Until the Lion Speaks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Peter, have you read it?
I have. I read it.
We should have had it. You know what? Make sure y'all go to Amazon and get that book, man.
I got it right upstairs.
I got a copy in my car.
Yes. And you doing speaking engagements as well now. People can contact you,
Yes.
reach out and make sure.
Yes.
You know, you so full of you got so many different tools under your belt. You know, it seemed like you was like that time was preparing you for this time.
Yep.
You know, we know 20 years a lot of time. I don't know if that was what it takes to bake the Billy cake to really be ready to be service to the people.
Man, I'm so glad you said that, Ali, because looking back on that, it probably did take that. And the reason why I say that, because I was locked up during the crack era. I was locked up when crack came to Chicago.
90s?
Yep. I was locked up during a time where I spent time in prison with a lot of guys who left and went home and became victims of the crack era, whether they ended up dying, whether they ended up becoming addicted, or whether they ended up becoming indicted federally and going away for life. And I'm gonna be honest, at one point, you know, being young, still real young, you know, I was like, man, I get out now, I can get rich. You know what I'm saying? Because everybody I know getting rich.
From crack?
Yeah. And that was all we had, you know, from where I came from.
Let me ask you, how many guys you know got rich selling drugs? I mean, really rich. I'm not talking about walking
I
out
know
one
quite
day.
a few. I know quite a few.
Hood rich.
I know quite a few.
Your rich might be different than the rich, but the difference is how many stayed rich is the
Yeah.
problem.
That's really what I'm asking.
That's the question. How many stayed rich from?
Not too many.
Not too many,
I've
right?
known a lot of them who was able to touch some money and ended up, you know, going to jail, you know what I'm saying? And pretty much now just getting back out. So
I mean, maybe the ones who stayed rich, you never heard of them, right? Because they figured out how to.
right. But
I don't know.
going back to the point I was making was that Ali said it may have took 20 years to bake that Billy, right? But at the same time, maybe that was probably the best time for me to be away. unfortunately, because things got real worse in our community. You know what I'm saying? During that time that I was incarcerated. And when I went
That was the really high levels of gun violence in the 1990s.
It
It
was
was close to 1,000.
You got locked up 86, right?
84
84,
Yeah.
and you got out when?
in 2004.
2004. You missed the whole.
But think about that. Think about that particular era.
Yeah.
It was two things that really impacted our community. It was the crack era, which gave rise to mass incarceration. Because when I went to prison, there was not a lot of black people going to the federal, getting federally indicted. You know, black people didn't really start hitting the state prisons until the mid 70s. And
The other
Not
period,
federal
I thought-
prison.
state,
said
when
State prison to the mid 70s?
black people didn't really start going to state prison in numbers until
In
like
big numbers.
the early mid 70s.
Wow.
It was number 16 prisons in Illinois when I went to prison. Now it's over 40. And then when Clinton became president, they came up with the crime bill where they started paying states to adopt federal sentencing laws.
Clinton, that's Peter Mann. Go
Well,
ahead.
he was the one who really adopted the Republican way of thinking around crime. And they started building prisons across the country. And the feds started indicting.
That's the prison industrial complex.
The feds started
That's when it
indicting a
took
lot
off.
of brothers in the 90s, and mass incarceration exploded.
And it's a jobs program in a lot of places
It's
in
a
America.
jobs program.
Yeah,
I'm
just
glad
like,
you said that.
just
You
like,
know, in a lot of rural areas in America, it's a jobs program. Put a prison in, create 500 jobs.
well, think about slavery. They created a lot of, that was the American economy. You know, plantation, you know, and now prisons, penitentiary. That created a lot of economy in these depressed communities in these rural neighborhoods because we don't have no prison. They take 65% of the prison population is coming from Chicago and Illinois.
Yeah.
And where they going?
Yeah.
To the rural areas, the prison, rural
Where they
areas.
creating jobs for, look, we had a conversation.
It's
One of
a
my-
cash crop.
My lead life coach, he said, when I was in prison, I went to jail in 1983. He said, I did 22 years. He said, when I was in prison, my father was in prison, my oldest brother was in prison. We was in a prison where I had a correctional officer that was a lieutenant whose father worked at that prison and his son had just got hired.
Yeah, it's family business.
I'm there with my
both
father,
ends.
my oldest brother being housed by a dude who father, him and his son worked in the same prison. Two sides, a different spectrum.
That's deep.
Peter
My
said
bad.
something
I ain't
earlier.
trying
You
to say
said we down in terms of violence.
We are down 3 years in a row, 6 out of the last 8 years, and down about 30% this year so far.
And I know for a fact, and you know, Peter goes to the highest levels of government to advocate for this work because of that, right?
That's right.
Now, CVI, whether we want to take credit or not, how much is the police budget a year, every year?
$2 billion a year, Chicago.
$2 billion.
And it ain't
Probably-
just started in the last 3 years, right?
$500 billion nationally.
And how much they pay out on complaints? Yearly.
Complaints, oh man, hundreds of millions of dollars a year.
So if we putting $2 billion into policing, and this ain't just the last 3 years, but now CVI is really ramping up, collaborating, very intentional, and we double digits down. That lets you know that it's not from a law enforcement point of view specifically.
I mean, the challenge is it's hard to show what's called causation. You can show correlation, like, you know, we're active and the numbers are going down and that correlates. But to stand up and say it is because of us, that's where some people will say, wait
I'm
a
not
second.
saying that, but what I'm saying is I know CVI has an active, intentional role in preventing
So
No question.
violence.
And the cops will say it too. The cops will say, your job is to stop the next shooting. My job is to investigate the last shooting.
So
my-
they don't
my
have
question-
a real strategy around preventing it. They gonna respond to it.
But my question is, what have they done differently?
What have they? I mean,
I'm saying the violence going down. What did the police say? We did this strategy that's
I mean,
now
for
doing
one thing, their work is much more data driven today than it used to be. Like in the old days, guys would walk a beat, right? And again, I'm not a policing expert, but I did work for the city back in the 90s. In the old days, a guy would walk a beat, and they, now they know every single shooting. They know exactly what time of day it happened. They know exactly the corners where it's happening. They know much more about the kind of guns they got. They used to have ShotSpotter, so a cop would show up at a shooting, and he already knew there were 3 guns involved, there were 30 bullets shot, and they would know the exact location.
That's great intel.
In the old days, 911, somebody called. It happened around the block. I don't know where it was. I don't know how many shooting. I don't know. I heard something. So you think about how much more information a cop today has?
No, I think they got a lot of information. Question.
Yeah.
What did they do? What did that information do to cause crime to go down, gun violence to go down?
I don't know. But what I can tell you is that they have come to understand in a much, much deeper way that if they want to prevent violence, they need to work with organizations like ours. They need to talk to guys like you. They need to be engaged with community leaders who are actually talking to people at risk. And they have to identify the people who are most at risk, which is what we do, and go find them and give them some help to get them before they fire the gun. That's what they now know that. And they didn't always believe that. They just believed that the thing to do was to arrest somebody and send them away.
And then that's to my other point, because when I talked about mass incarceration, right, creating these laws to incarcerate people didn't slow down people from going to jail and committing crime.
No. I mean, the fact is we have fewer shootings, fewer homicides, and fewer arrests today. Fewer arrests and fewer shootings. Put 2 and 2 together, what do you got? What you got is deterrence. What you got is somebody's out there preventing shootings.
Exactly.
And when you prevent a shooting, you don't get an arrest, right? But so, I mean, the number of arrests today from police officers is about half of what it was every year before the pandemic.
And to that point, we have to also be mindful that if you don't involve the community around addressing this, well, this is something that we now see. This is the evidence when you do involve the community, when you do work together. Because before then, you had mass incarceration in the midst of them creating these draconian laws to incarcerate. You had policing thinking that we don't have to work with nobody. We gonna do what we do. I'm talking about up until now, and it never stopped people from committing crime. It never deterred violence from happening. You can't arrest a young man and say, I'm gonna make you an example. Because guess what? 10 of his homies is waiting to be the same example.
LTO, that's what I want to ask you about. I want you to say what LTO means to you, and then we're gonna finish with that, okay?
LTO, as we know, license to operate. That's just having the credibility to be able to go into a place, a community, where young guys, where we have identified it to be a problem. It may be a conflict that's going on. It may be an area where can't too many other people go because it may be a high crime rate. It may be a high propensity for violence. Or you dealing with young men who you know are violent. And in order to try to curb that violence, someone has to have a relationship with these young men to talk about what can we do to help you. And they have to be able to receive you, respect you, and trust you to an extent to listen.
And why do you have LTO? And why are you able to do this work?
Well, you have to build it up. Your credibility has to be, established based off who you are, the work you do, the relationships you have. It's not hard to build a crowd. It's not easy to build a LTO. It's easy to lose it if you're not sincere about what you're doing, if you're not a man of your word, if you're just doing this for a paycheck. You can't buy credibility. So I think I work. My heart is in this work. Like, I I talk about the 14 young men I lost, right? But I never try to forget about the hundreds of young men that I haven't lost, that I've been able to establish a good relationship with. And that's what my LTO is at right there, with all those young men that I've worked with, you know, that I've hopefully helped them to have a better life, man, a better outlook on life, you know, give them some hope, you know. A lot of these young guys, they don't have hope, you know what I'm saying? So.
All right. The lion has spoken.
That's right. My brother, our brother.
Man,
The
appreciate
real
y'all.
LTO, man. Welcome to LTO, the license to operate. See you next time.